Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar about how to survive, how to enjoy yourself in the future of the media world. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Oleg Dmitriev. I'm the professor of HSC, and before that, I used to work for various international news organizations, including CNN. I used to be the contributor to the show CNN World Report. That was way back in the past century, at the beginning and the middle of the 90s. Now I'm advising various Russian international media on how to survive, how to progress with the story, and also I'm an advisor to Россия Сегодня Informational News Agency. And my second half is the professor of media department for High School of Economics. And we launched the program called International News Production. This is a 2-year master's program where we share all the things with you guys on how to produce modern news, what you should do and should not do when you are facing problems if you are a journalist, or even if you are a blogger. How can you be successful with the content and how you can be journalists, and we also teach journalists how to be bloggers in a very competitive media environment that is constantly developing. So we are giving you all the upfront knowledge that we got from international broadcasting in Russia and from other countries. We have professors from Britain, Germany, and United States that liked our upfront idea to teach not only just mainstream news, but ways that were successful in various alternative media. So that is why I decided to share with you the future of the media and the skills that journalist has to possess when he's talking to an international audience, when he's telling an international story. So that's the thing, and you will see me in the corner, and you are seeing the presentation where there'll be not many pictures, but I hope you like this manner of communication. There will be just a talk on how I would work if I were young and if I were choosing the career path in international media. So now let's proceed to the slide, the presentation itself. So right now, just people, especially young people, especially people who work and check social media, they don't like to read long bits of information. They don't like to watch boring people telling them the story like politicians do sometimes in various parts of the world. Besides, they like when people talk to you. I don't see your faces, but please pay attention to the fact how I talk to you. So every time after 3-4 sentences, I'm making a pause and just to confirm whether you agree with me or not, or whether you understood what I've said. So this is called conversation. And to my mind, television, web, and radio are all conversational these days. Just if you write long and juicy text for the media, but it would be long, you won't get a success. You won't attract audiences for this text. That's why all the media consumers in the modern world, where communications are spreading fast, especially in the big cities, they just want conversations. Short and nice and crisp conversations. So that's the key thing that we teach here in the HSC, how to be conversational in your text. And also the most important thing, that in the modern world, in the future of the media, there will be no more articles, no more essays, no more analysis, but the key thing for the modern media is the story itself. Like, what story are we talking about? For example, if I tell you that my friend Peter has just got married, this would be the fact and not a story, because in this case, you don't care about Peter and you don't care much about me, just about my job and this nice webinar. But this is not the story. But if I tell you that my friend Peter got married and his wife, his spouse, is 25 years older than he is, so that would be interesting. For example, in the political life, we have some examples like that. Like, take a look at the French president, Macron, whose wife is several years senior than him. And this is the fact that attracted most of the media in this environment. So that is what I call storytelling. Every time there is a story that we just don't see right away, every time there is a story that takes us to the next level of the story. For example, there was a wonderful occasion, well, I'm using the word wonderful, but this is my opinion. Journalists do not like opinions, but isn't it wonderful when the pilot landed the plane in the cornfield? This happened not so long ago, and none of the passengers suffered. So this is like a miracle, you know. And when we cover the story, we discover that the pilots said that they did exactly the thing that they were taught. So that is why the story is interesting. That's why we may come up with an interesting story. How do they train pilots? What do they tell them in such dangerous circumstances, when the wheels of the plane are out of control, when the birds came into the engines of the plane? So what do? And they did exactly what they've been told. So that might be an interesting story to tell. And also, if you are going to be a communicator in a big city, in a big world, you have to ask yourself a question: how to survive? Because the older you get, the more difficult for you, the more difficult it will be for you to compete with the next generation, because they will be faster than you and the information is spreading fast. So, for example, let me tell you the example of 20 years ago in Russia, when video editors made the transition to digital broadcasting. Those who were successful were the first ones, because they got all the jobs imaginable. So the objective for the modern world is how to tell the story in a fast way, in a blogger way. Just if you are a blogger or a journalist, if you have your own blog, if you can talk about all these things, if you can talk on camera, just the way I do, if you can explain the whole story with this. So that would be the case. That would be a very interesting quality, very interesting skill of yours that will help you to develop in the future media world. So that is the thing that we'll have to keep in mind. And also, I'm sorry, it's just so every time we talk to people, every time we talk to you guys, just sometimes it's very hard to express yourself with simple sentences. Sometimes in your school essays, in your university projects, teacher asks you to be very elaborate. And this is something what the modern media wants. If you want to convey the information very successfully, you have to teach yourself simple sentences. Why? Because like a simple sentence consists of average 7 words, or from 5 to 9. So that is the sentence that we can easily memorize. That is our scope of knowledge. So please, please, please try to practice the skill to talk with simple sentences, and you will get lots of success. And it doesn't matter how you do it. You can do it in you can do it with your voice, with your story. You can tell the story orally, just like the way I'm doing. I'm doing it right now. Or you can write the story with simple sentences. That is also a very conversational way to convey your thoughts. So this is also this is something that we teach our students as well. Well, just coming back to the next thought. I forgot to tell you, if you have any questions, should you have any questions, please write this in our chat. So why do we keep it conversational? Because if the person talk by the 20-second bits, there is more chance that people will memorize this information. And sometimes, as it was the case with the journalists of the past that worked for the radio of 80 years ago, they didn't have any computers, they didn't have any webinars. What they had is the piece of paper, the sheet of paper that consisted of like lines, and each of them had to write only 3 sentences on each line. Why? So because there were like 25 lines, and the editors allowed you to fill just 20 to keep the news item conversational. So that is also the fun practice that we have, like how to tell the story with 25 seconds. Well, and that is a fun part. This is what I tell students. In the future world, if you want to tell the story fast, just pick all the main facts and be ready to reproduce it for 20-25 seconds. So, this is all about conversation, as I've already said. Just each reader, viewer thinks that somebody is really talking to him, and he sometimes does not care. Sometimes he does not care about the address of the website, about the media itself, and you don't care where you work. So that is the job. If you are in the news business, if you do the job well, you'll get a lot of attention from your audience. But if you decide to just worry about it, that well, nobody reads me, well, that's to my mind a bad strategy, because there are tons of communicators in this world. If you do it fast, people step by step will start memorizing who you are. So yeah, the consumers sometimes are jerks, because they do not, they will never say thanks, they will never be grateful to the work you are doing. So that is something to keep in mind. And you don't have to be disappointed about it. Just do your job. Well, sometimes with the students I use this phrase: journalist is the most hardworking, lazy person in the world. This was written by David Randall, and he had the book called Universal Journalist. This book was popular in the States in the 90s and at the beginning of the 21st century, and it was translated into several languages, including Russian. So that's why lots of journalists really paid attention to the all the facts that were listed in the book, and they were not exactly happy. Why not? Because David Reynolds said that journalist has to edit, has to write, has to film, has to take pictures, has to do a little bit of everything, and not many good writers, good storytellers in writing were happy about it. That is why Reynolds said this phrase: is the most hardworking, lazy person in the world. What did he mean by lazy? He meant the fact that each person has to develop the skill of planning the story. For example, if you are lazy in a good sense of the word, you can plan the story in such a way that you will never do extra movements that are not necessary. For example, if you're going to write a story about some boring press conference or boring scientific conference, well, people who are not who do not care about this branch of science will never bother to read it. But if you pick out interesting people, interesting discoveries, interesting topics, then you might get a lot of success. And in this case, you don't have to write a book or about the whole conference. You just pick something that might interest your viewer, your reader, your media consumer. And that is exactly what is happening with the Nobel Prizes this year. Every one of them is connected with an important field of science that will help us to survive in the future when there is no cancer, no blindness, or something like that. And in this case, the job of the journalist is to tell just one story in a very comprehensible way, even though the story may be long, even if the story may be boring. So that is something to realize. That is why I think that the journalist sometimes is lazy. He does not want to do many things, but he wants to follow his original plan that would bring him a success. Well, if you agree or disagree with this, please use the chat and leave your comments here. Well, if we take a look at the consumers, at our audience, so what are the things that we are facing? Well, the first thing is too much information. There are lots of rumors published in the internet that Donald Trump died, Donald Trump went crazy, and today we have the Brexit issue once again, and it looks like there's been an agreement between the UK and the EU on the Brexit issue. And right now, all the journalists and all the newsrooms worldwide just are thinking twice before publishing this story, because they're concerned with one fact: just how to be quicker than others and how to convey the right information, how to avoid rumors. And the first reports suggest that the Brexit has already been confirmed, but no details are given. So that is the thing where the false information from non-professional sources may come up and just spoil the clearness, the transparency of the story for the consumers. The second thing to realize that there is no good and bad things in this world. For example, can you tell me whether Donald Trump is a good guy or not? Well, to his family, he's a good one, of course. To the Democrats, he's not good at all. To his electorate, he seems pretty decent. That's why he managed to become the president of the US. And also, just this is my personal opinion, Donald Trump has never hit any foreign country yet, just like the previous American presidents were doing. For example, there was a killing of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya at the time of Barack Obama. There was an execution of Saddam Hussein in Iraq at the time of George W. Bush Jr. There was a bombing of Yugoslavia in the times of Bill Clinton. So Trump hasn't hit anybody yet. So that's why the question whether Trump is good or bad is very complicated. And this third thing is that the consumers do not like to drop their values, their view in the world. For example, in 2016, I also write blogs about sports, columns about sports for the agencies where I work, but not sports, but how sports are connected with real life. And in 2016, I had lots of debates with the professors worldwide about the so-called doping system in Russia. By the documents that all investigators had, you would not say that this is this is the case. But the political motivation of some stations was to prove that there was a nationwide intrusion into the anti-doping system, which has never been the case. And I was the one who was trying to present facts to the rest of the world because, well, modern media, if they don't agree with Russia, they still have to stick to the second point of view. So I was the one who was defending the so-called bad Russians. Yeah, I was the one who was defending that and gave a second point of view on the story. Because in the States, for example, most of the people ignored the fact that over 14 Olympic champions really were caught with the use of doping. So that is something of a challenge. And don't expect that the consumers will immediately take your point of view. So that is the what is called the challenge. Another thing is non-journalists can sometimes write better, but it doesn't matter whether you are a journalist or not. Good storytellers are the ones who are best. For example, one of the astronauts decided to sing the song of David Bowie in space. That was several years ago. And then he edited a video clip for this song with pictures of him floating through the space at the International Space Station. So this film attracted more than 30 million viewers worldwide. And the guy was not a journalist. You've got to be a very good communicator with a unique idea. And only then you'll have success. And that is, to my mind, the recipe on how to survive. Take a look at Greta, who made a speech at the United Nations. She had, as she thought, something unique to say, and well, the adults started to listen to her. Well, is she a good communicator? Well, she has some positive things, and in the modern world, in the global environment, that was the message: to be upfront, to be clear. And if you are not a journalist, you sometimes have to be emotional. Journalists usually never convey emotions because it's up to the consumer to reach the audience. The audiences, it's up to the consumer to decide whether this is good or bad, and this is not a job of the journalist. Well, let's move on. What are the other challenges for the media? So, new methods appear much faster than the previous ones. For example, I'm 51 years old, and I can reveal the secret about myself. I started to type with the use of the computer when I was already 29 years old. And still, the computer is something that I did not use in my childhood. The computer is something that really sometimes irritated me, but more and more I keep using it, and I'm having fun with this. But if I have difficult problems, well, I always have my daughter who is 24 and who is much faster than me. Well, but what's the lesson from all this? Be prepared that the new gadgets will come up, and you'll have to use them. For example, take a look at all the social networks. Some people prefer Facebook, some people prefer Instagram, but those who are very fast in all of them, just in Twitter, in other ones, and well, in Russian there is an analog for Facebook called VK. So if you are fast in all of them, so you are a successful communicator. So what else do we have to realize? Also, the audience loves storytellers on screen, because if I write my webinar, none of you will ever read it. Just if you hear me saying something here live and with no paper, which is exactly what I'm doing right now, So that means I'll be a successful communicator for you, and people like me will be successful because this is very fast and quick way to transmit all the stories that are happening in the world. So, and please think about it. That might be a good idea how to approach the modern media. Learn yourself to be a good storyteller. And in this case, you just don't have to look at the camera, but you'll have to enjoy yourself when you do it. Well, what else do we really have to see? Sometimes the job of the journalist is to process information from the sources. And sometimes when you get a press release or when you get very technical news, your job is to make it right for the consumer. If you get lots of technical stuff from, let's say, from Apple about iPhone 11, for example, they will not matter to you much. The only thing you'll be interested in is to how you would get success with 3 cameras that are built in into this iPhone. That is a unique thing, and this is the answer that most of the people are waiting for, especially those who are on Mac. So that is the detail which is good for all the consumers, for all the rank and file consumers, spectators, viewers, readers who know nothing about how it was done technically. They just want to be clear. They just want to know how it will be useful for them. Yeah. So that's this is a new reality when we have to explain very difficult things in the world of technology with a very simple language, and this sometimes must be fun. And your audience may be grateful for this if you work that way. That is exactly what the global media do when the presentation like this is coming into the world scene of news. Another example here is the debates between Huawei, the Chinese company that is also connected with the mobile phones, and the US government. Because, well, people who use Huawei, who use this platform, who use this brand for mobile phones, are very concerned about the dangers from section that Huawei might be experiencing. So that is something that is really important to my mind. How can consumers get a very simple piece of information? How can this be accessible? How can this be transparent? And how can this be simple? So that's what the new media reality is. All right. Now, if we know how to keep it simple, if we know how to keep it conversational, we have to think what news is about. To my mind, there are 3 factors that determine the news value. Let's start from the third one, and then we'll go up. Well, this is the target audience. Every time I ask myself a question, who watches me, who reads me, who listens to me? Because that is very important, because you have to be the guy that people know. You have to be the guy that conveys the same thoughts and the same ideas that the viewers are looking for. And every time I go to one of the bureaus of Sputnik, for example, if I go to Central Asian country of Kazakhstan, I ask myself a question: what would I do if I lived in Kazakhstan? What would I do if I speak Kazakh? How would I write for the national audience? Or if I go to Tallinn in Estonia, I would also ask myself a question: how would I do it? What exactly would I like to convey if I was broadcasting for the people of Estonia? Also, very important is the editorial policy of the media that you're looking for. And just before choosing this or that media, please read the editorial guidelines that these media have. Because there you will find out that sometimes behind all these nice words on how to communicate with the global media, there might be some border issues where the media does not follow its well-written guidelines. This happens to the BBC, this happens to the Russian international media, this happens to CNN, to everybody. Because sometimes they lose the string of fairness, and sometimes the editors thinks that they think exactly the way their audience is thinking, and that is, to my mind, very dangerous, because in this case you won't be reporting the stories objectively. And the third thing is the reality that drives the news. And the reality may be manifested in several forms. Let's take a look at them. Well, first, the story has to cause human interest. It can be interesting for many people in the world. For example, the Korean president, the Korean leader, some people in the Western world call him a dictator, Kim Jong-un, rode a horse to the mountain which is sacred to many Koreas. So, and when the pictures were released, everybody went, wow, because Kim Jong-un had a nice clothes for the winter. His white horse was very beautiful. Just I don't know what breed exactly that was, but it was really great to watch it. And the snow was white. The picture was interesting, and that caused a lot of interesting among the readers. Yeah. The second thing is change. Yeah. Well, sometimes if the level of national currency goes either up or down, in this case, you'll have to think about the consumers, because some of them have the investments like this in the foreign currency, so that would change the mode of their being. So that's the second thing. Or if there is a flood in some countries, that is all. That also means the change for many consumers. That also means change for the people who live in Bahamas when they were stricken by the huge tornado. Just I don't remember right now which name it was. If you were in Japan and watching Rugby World Cup, some of the teams were also influenced by the tropical rainstorms, and several games of the competition were canceled due to this reason. So that is about change. People also want something unusual. They want attractive facts, and they want the new story to be timely. What do I mean by timely? Timeliness is something that is really valuable, because you don't want to tell a story that really happened yesterday. You don't want to tell a story that's is already in the past. You have to be timely with all your stories, and that's the demand of the whole profession. Yeah. So what else do we have to take into consideration regarding the news drivers? Proximity. Well, that's a very tough criteria. But for example, if you keep telling the story about 20 people who are remaining in around the dangerous area, who are surrounded by the water after the floods, and if these people are in Indonesia, nobody would care about these people in Russia. I'm sorry, but that's a tough world. Just like nobody in Indonesia would care about Russian residents caught up in the floods. So the story has to have some meaning for the residents of your countries. It has to be important, and it has to be understanding, and there should be conflicts around it. Yeah, the conflict is about For example, let's take a look about the discussion um, between Trump and Kim Jong-un. I already said I've already mentioned them, and yes, the conflict did not lead to war, and that's the most important thing, that the conflict ended in such a way. Well, thank you. Just before we continue, I'd like to answer two questions, and this was first comes from the guy KS. I wonder where you are from. So the question is, what do you think about the fact that Donald Trump is doing media from his Twitter? What is the future of the newspaper media? Will everything be online and video? Well, thank you very much for the question. By the way, Kes, it's interesting to me. Just please write which country you are from. Well, many people predicted the death of the newspapers, of the death of the magazines, but they still exist online, they still exist offline. And I think that all the things from the old media will remain in this and that form. Coming back to your question about Donald Trump, why he is doing the media from his Twitter. Well, actually, some people tell me that he does it after he watches Sean Hannity from Fox News, and sometimes the Twitter messages of Trump coincide with what this TV presenter, I mean Sean Hannity, from what this TV presenter says. Yeah. So, to my mind, Trump's Twitter is a part of his communication strategy that works well with everything. But tweet of Trump is not a story. It's just up to the journalist to pick out the meaning, develop the stories that might be connected with Donald Trump. Twitter is not the story. Well, if you take a look at the modern websites, you will have to pay attention to the fact that the story is not just told by the text, but by the pictures, and also by the things called embeds. What is an embed? It's the message from social network that is incorporated into the story. So even in this case, the tweet of Donald Trump is part of the story, and not something. It's not something that can build the story itself. So it's up to the journalist to decipher what Donald Trump can say and or can do. So that is something that I also teach in the news. Nothing will ever go away. Newspapers will stay, magazines will stay, well, Twitter will stay, and well, everything may be either offline and online. And as for the video, well, actually, the sound is also very important these days, because in the States, for example, there are lots of podcasts that are not that popular in Russia, but in the States there are lots of podcasts that last like 2 hours, 3 hours, and that depends on the angle of the story. For example, if somebody is talking for 2 hours, well, and if this somebody is not that important, that's also not a bad thing. For example, nobody knows Oleg Dmitriev in the rest of the world. Well, some people know me, some people remember me from CNN, but if I say that I'm a Republican who hates Republicans, in this case, I'll become a very interesting person to listen to. And there is a guy like that in the States. His name is Mark Levin, and well, he has podcasts that last 125 minutes, like 90 minutes, more than 2 hours, you know. And sometimes they lost them more than 2 hours. Also, for example, take a look at the way you buy the tickets online. You just fill all the forms, you send it, you pay, and here you have got the tickets. For example, I'm a Mac consumer, and maybe the day will soon come when I say, hey Siri, well, of course, no Siri. Hey Siri, I'd like to book a ticket from Moscow to Paris. And Siri will start talking to me. So that is something that I'm applying. So we never know which media would be more successful. Maybe podcasts and conversation will be more popular than video. Of course, KS, you are right, and say hi to Latvia, say hi to Riga. Yeah, perhaps you are right, but we never know how media will develop. The example with Siri shows the importance of the sound. Well, this is something we'll have to care about as well. And the next question comes from Alina Lovely, I'm sorry. So I would also like to know where you are from. Thanks for the webinar. You are more than welcome. Just please write to the organizers of the webinar if you want to have some more. I can share my thoughts about various media strategies of the future. And what do you think of new social media starts entering the old media? For example, the TikTok star Amelia Gething, who broke into the BBC channel. And the BBC launches now this 20-year-old comedian girl with 7 million followers at TikTok aims to attract younger viewers to the channel. Well, sometimes, well, I think that's a very positive thing because they don't just bring, BBC does not bring young people from TikTok. This case shows that BBC is bringing more storytellers, more good and young storytellers. And that is the feature of traditional media. It now happens that all the good storytellers are in YouTube, on other platforms, and on TikTok that got huge over the past few years. And to my mind, this is not new media that enter old media. The convergence is happening. The interdependence between good new media and old media is unfolding. Yeah, that's also the case. Just to watch what good stories exist in different platforms. So that I hope that answers your question. Say hi to Armenia and Yerevan. So yeah, if you have any more questions, please write your questions in the chat. But meanwhile, just to add some other thoughts I wanted to share with you. Well, sources are important in this case, and we have to analyze where information is coming from, because the sources might be different. The sources might be not quite correct. The international classification of the stories is this. The person can have authority, or it can have no authority at all. A person may be informed or not informed. The person may be partial or impartial. The person may be named or unnamed. Well, for example, take a look at the war in Syria. And Russia is helping the Syrian government, as you probably know. Like for the Russian audience, the most reliable source is the Russian Ministry of Defense. Well, does it have authority? Yes. Is it informed? Well, yes. Is it partial or impartial? Yes. It's not. It reflects the view of the Russian military and Russian government. So in this case, it's rather partial than impartial. Is it named or unnamed? Yes, it is named. But some media in the rest of the world are using the so-called Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. This observatory is based in London, and this observatory has only one person that founded it, and there is a second part-time guy who's helping him sometimes. So the observatory consists of 1.5 people. Do they have authority? Well, rather no than yes. Are they informed or not? Well, in this case, they are not. They are not informed in all the issues, though they have some contacts in Syria. Are they partial or impartial? Of course, they are also partial, and they are not very well named, because how can you build an observatory from 1.5 people? So that's the difference of the sources. Every time you do something, please analyze which source are you exploring, which source are you trying to are you trying to get? Yeah. What are other underwater currents in the modern media? Yeah, because, well, aggregators like Huffington Post, like BuzzFeed, sometimes use the information, they copy this and put it on their websites. And the first danger for the news is what I call the copy-paste. Quoting facts that were not confirmed. For example, sometimes American media dropped the word allegedly from the description of Russia. Some of them thought that there were interference to the US election. And in the West, it was portrayed like alleged interference of Russia into the US election. And for some mysterious reason, this word alleged was dropped, and nothing has been proven. So many people took this phrase, the interference of Russia to the US election, without this phrase being confirmed. So this is what I call the danger of the copy-paste. The second part is the word of mouth. Distortion of information that got lost in translation, or that got lost in the way. For example, that this sometimes happens to the witnesses of the events, because just if you see the bombing or explosion, you get really agitated with this, and sometimes you start talking with the same people who witnessed that, and each of the witnesses might have different stories, and sometimes they may not realize that these are the words of their own. Another thing is the unverified information presented as a fact. This is something you have to be aware when you read international media. Yeah, what else is important in this world? Well, this comes the issue of fact-checking. Yeah. The thing is to find the initial source, and the next thing is to find the confirmation from 2 or 3 independent sources. I have a friend, an American journalist who works in Russia, and what he says is, if your mother says she loves you, please find another source. And what happens, you go to your own brother and ask him a question, does our mother love me? And the senior brother would always say, no, she doesn't love you. That's a joke. But it's very important to really compare the sources, find different approaches to this or that problem. And unless there is a confirmation, just please try your best to verify this story. Because the verification system is the king right now. Many channels, including RT in Russia, use it, and they use it quite successfully. So finding the right sources is the king of the global communication, because we have to think not just about ways we tell the story, but exactly what we are saying with that. But it's also necessary to check the accounts of the people and how they present the information on the to the world. Is this just an account, or can we find some more personal information about the person, and so on and so forth? Then we have to think about the number of the reposts out there. So how the profile is connected with the spreading the news, and how regularly does the viewer make posts. and when was the account created, and what kind of content is in it. Just let me give you one example I found in the Russian media. Some of the people who know this is in Russian, but I will translate. Well, on the picture is Pelé, one of the most renowned footballers with the most number of goals. Well, this is still argued because not many goals have been recorded in the right way. Well, and this piece of news that Pelé, has a legendary football player, has died. This was reported by some of the Russian television station exactly at the time when there was a fire at Notre Dame de Paris in Paris. And then just when I saw that, I said, well, what a day. Just too many bad things are happening. But when just some journalists asked me, is that true or not? I said, well, in this case, you have to reach the source. You reach the source. You have to really reach Brazil, because if it really happens, the whole Brazil would be crying, and you could find the photos of Pelé. So I did exactly the same. I went to the web page of one of the most influential newspapers in São Paulo called Folha de São Paulo, and there was nothing about it. It was only just one short news item that Pelé had been operated, I think, on his kidneys or something. Yeah, and he just had been released from the hospital. Imagine how global media would look like if we conveyed this information. The same thing happened with the Notre Dame, because some people made a mistake. They were writing about destroyed mosaics, and one of the reporters thought that it was a clock. And he said the famous clock of Notre Dame suffered. There are no clocks in Notre Dame. So these are the things. These are the things that that I usually talk about in the lectures. And well, this is something that we have to realize, is how to deal with post-truth. This is my last example. What is a post-truth? Post-truth is the phenomenon when people accept an argument based on emotions and beliefs and not facts. So, this is where I can stop unless there are more questions. And yeah, just this is something that I've been saying to you. All of this information is not from a textbook. It's from my personal experience. And this is the experience that I'm passing on to my students at international news programs. So just when you are browsing through the page, please find International News Production, HSE, and you will have a web page of our program. So if you would like to get more seminars like this, please drop a line here, just make it known to the organizers of this webinar, and I will be perfectly willing to continue my thoughts about modern media. Thank you very much. Have fun with your life. Thanks a lot for being here. All the best. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.